There is a mistake that doesn't look like a mistake. In fact, it feels natural, almost harmless. You have an idea, a dream, a plan, and the first instinct is to share it, to tell someone, to hear, "That's amazing." But what if I told you that in that exact moment, you might already be weakening what you're trying to build? In Buddhist philosophy, there is a deep understanding that not all energy should be exposed. Intentions, especially in their early stages, are fragile. They are like seeds, and a seed, when exposed too early, does not grow faster, it dies. Most people don't lose because they lack talent or discipline. They lose because they talk too much. They announce their plans before they have structure, before they have consistency, before they have roots. And once something is spoken, it leaves the inner world and enters the external, where it becomes vulnerable to doubt, opinion, comparison, and subtle forms of sabotage. And the most dangerous part? It doesn't feel like sabotage. It feels like conversation, support, advice. But every opinion you receive begins to reshape your clarity. Every reaction plants a new thought, and slowly, what was once pure intention becomes confusion. Buddhism teaches that the mind is easily influenced when it is not yet stable. And when you expose your plans too early, you are allowing external noise to interfere with something that hasn't even formed yet. You are interrupting your own process before it has a chance to become real. This is why silence is not weakness. Silence is protection. It is the space where intention becomes structure, where thought becomes action, where identity begins to shift. And those who understand this move differently. While others are talking, explaining, announcing, they are building, quietly, precisely, unseen. There is something most people never question. Not everything needs to be said. In fact, in Buddhist philosophy, speech is not just communication. It is energy in motion.
Every word you speak carries intention, influence, and consequence. And when you speak too early about something important, you disperse the very energy you need to build it. This is why silence is not just strategic, it is spiritual. Buddhism teaches the principle of right speech, not speaking impulsively, not speaking unnecessarily, and most importantly, not speaking in a way that creates harm, even subtle harm. And here's what most people miss. Speaking about your plans prematurely can harm your own path. Because the moment you speak, you release. You release excitement, which reduces your internal drive. You release focus, which weakens your direction. And you open space for external interference, opinions, doubts, projections, all entering a process that should still be protected within you. And this is where things become subtle. Even positive reactions can harm you. Someone says, "That's amazing, you're going to succeed." And for a moment, you feel like you already did something. Your brain registers progress that hasn't actually happened. And without realizing it, your urgency decreases. Your discipline softens. This is why many people talk a lot and build very little. In Buddhism, monks often take vows of silence not because they have nothing to say, but because they understand the power of conserving energy. When you stop speaking unnecessarily, your awareness increases, your focus sharpens, your actions become more intentional, and suddenly, you stop leaking your potential. You begin to realize that not everything needs validation. Not everything needs to be explained. Some things are meant to be protected, developed, and strengthened in silence, until they are strong enough to exist in the world without being shaken. Because when something is truly solid, it doesn't need to be announced. It becomes visible on its own. There is a moment, right after you share a plan, where something subtle begins to change. Not outside, but inside you.
What once felt clear, direct, almost certain, suddenly becomes negotiable. And most people don't realize this shift is not natural, it is induced. Because the moment you reveal your plans, you invite interference. In Buddhist philosophy, the mind is deeply impressionable, especially when something is still forming. Your intentions are not yet stable. They are flexible, sensitive, still seeking direction. And when you expose them to others, you are no longer the only one shaping them. Now, other minds enter the process. And here's the truth most people avoid. People don't respond to your plans from your perspective. They respond from theirs, from their fears, their limitations, their past failures, their insecurities. Someone who never succeeded will unconsciously project doubt. Someone who is afraid of risk will advise caution. Someone who envies you may subtly discourage you. And none of this feels aggressive. It comes disguised as concern, as advice, as, "I'm just being realistic." But slowly, these external voices begin to dilute your internal clarity. You start questioning what once felt obvious. You hesitate, you adjust, you delay. And without realizing it, you disconnect from your own path. Buddhism teaches that clarity comes from within, not from collective opinion. The more voices you allow into an unfinished vision, the further you move from your original intention. And this is why many people stay stuck, not because they don't have ideas, but because their ideas are constantly being reshaped by others before they can become real. This is why silence becomes discipline. Because keeping your plans to yourself is not about secrecy. It's about preserving clarity. It's about giving your vision enough time to become strong, defined, and resistant to external noise. And once it reaches that point, you won't need advice. You won't need validation. You'll move with certainty. There is a difference between having an idea and having an advantage. And most people lose that advantage the moment they open their mouth, because not everything you know is meant to be shared. In Buddhist philosophy, there is an understanding that what you cultivate internally is part of your path, something personal, something earned through awareness and discipline. And when you expose it too early, you break that process. You turn something sacred into something common. Your strategies, the way you think, the way you solve problems, the way you move differently. This is your edge. It's what separates you from the average. But the moment you start explaining everything, teaching everything, revealing every detail, you remove the distance between you and everyone else. And in a world where most people are competing for the same opportunities, that distance matters. But here's the deeper layer.
Sometimes people don't even need to steal your ideas intentionally. They just observe, absorb, and replicate. Not out of malice, but out of instinct. They see something that works, something valuable, and they adapt it. And suddenly, what made you unique is no longer exclusive, and you're left wondering why things feel harder. In Buddhism, wisdom is not just about knowing, it is about discernment. Knowing what to say, when to say it, and what to keep within. Because not all knowledge is meant to be distributed freely, especially when it is still part of your growth. This is why true builders move differently. They don't announce their methods. They don't explain every step. They don't feel the need to prove how they are doing things. They protect the process. They refine it in silence. And when the results appear, people see the outcome, but not the path. And that's what keeps them ahead. Because in the end, your strategy is not just information. It is leverage. And once you give it away too early, you lose control of it. There is a force that almost no one talks about, not because it doesn't exist,
but because it is uncomfortable to admit. It's subtle, invisible, and often unintentional. But it can destroy what you're building before it even becomes real. Envy. In Buddhist philosophy, envy is not just an emotion. It is a disturbance of the mind. A reaction that arises when someone sees in you what they feel they lack in themselves. And the moment you expose your progress, your ideas, your direction, you unknowingly activate this energy in others. And here's the truth most people don't want to accept. Even people who like you can feel it. Not consciously, not with bad intentions, but in subtle ways, through comparison, through insecurity, through silent discomfort. And this creates an invisible tension around what you are building. A tension that doesn't always show itself directly, but influences how people respond to you. Sometimes it comes as doubt disguised as advice. Sometimes as jokes that minimize your vision. Sometimes as silence where support should exist. And slowly, without realizing it, your energy starts to shift. You begin to question yourself. You feel watched, judged, compared. And what was once a natural flowing process becomes heavy, forced, uncertain. Not because your idea changed, but because the environment around it did. This is why Buddhism emphasizes awareness of external influences, because not all environments are neutral. And when something is still growing, when it's still fragile, exposure can weaken it. Just like a small flame, too much wind will not make it stronger, it will put it out. This is why silence becomes protection again. When you grow in silence, you remove comparison. You remove external pressure. You allow your process to evolve naturally without interference. And most importantly, you protect your mental state, which is the foundation of everything you are building. Because in the end, it's not always the lack of effort that destroys your progress. Sometimes, it's the energy around it.
There is a phase in every meaningful transformation that feels almost empty from the outside, as if nothing is happening, as if all your effort is dissolving into silence without any visible return. And this is exactly the moment where most people give up, not because they lack discipline, but because they misunderstand what real progress looks like. In Buddhist philosophy, what appears empty is often where the deepest construction is taking place. Growth does not always announce itself. It does not always come with visible rewards or external recognition. Instead, it unfolds quietly, in repetition, in small adjustments, in the invisible refinement of your mind and your behavior. When you choose to continue without being seen, something rare begins to form within you. You are no longer acting for validation, no longer depending on encouragement, no longer negotiating your effort based on how you feel that day. Your actions start to detach from emotion and attach themselves to something more stable, something internal, something that does not fluctuate. This is where discipline stops being an effort and starts becoming identity. Because when no one is watching, there is no performance. There is no need to prove, no need to explain, no need to show progress. There is only you and the process. And in that space, something extremely powerful happens. Your focus deepens, your awareness sharpens, and your actions become more precise, not because you are forcing them, but because there is no longer noise interfering with them. Most people never experience this level of clarity because they are too busy being seen. They share too early, they expose too much. They interrupt their own growth by seeking recognition before their foundation is strong enough to sustain it. But those who understand the power of silence move differently. They allow themselves to grow without interruption, to fail without exposure, to improve without pressure.
And this creates an advantage that cannot be easily replicated. From the outside, it looks like nothing is happening, but internally, everything is aligning. Your thinking becomes clearer, your execution becomes sharper, your resistance becomes weaker. And by the time the results finally appear, they don't look like luck, they don't look like sudden success, they look inevitable. Because what was built in silence was built to last. At a certain point in your journey, something shifts in a way that no longer requires explanation. You don't feel the same urge to talk, to justify, to prove. Not because you lost ambition, but because what you are building has finally gained substance. And in Buddhist philosophy, this marks a silent transition from intention to embodiment. Up until now, everything has been internal. You've been refining your discipline, protecting your energy, resisting the need to be seen. And while others were announcing every step, you were quietly becoming someone different. But there comes a moment where the results begin to surface, not because you decided to show them, but because they can no longer be hidden. And this is where most people get it wrong. They believe success needs to be announced, displayed, validated. But real progress does not need noise. It reveals itself through consistency, through presence, through the way you carry yourself. People begin to notice the shift before you say anything. They see it in your decisions, in your focus, in the way you no longer hesitate where you once doubted. In Buddhism, there is a deep respect for natural unfolding. Nothing is forced, nothing is rushed. A flower does not open because it wants to be seen. It opens because it is ready. And in the same way, your results should not be exposed prematurely. They should emerge when they are strong enough to exist without being shaken by opinion. Because when you reveal something too early, you still depend on reaction.
You still care how it will be received. But when something is truly built, that dependency disappears. You don't need approval. You don't need recognition. You simply allow what is real to be seen. And that changes the way others perceive you. Not as someone who talks about growth, but as someone who embodies it. Not as someone chasing success, but as someone who has become aligned with it. And this creates a different kind of respect, one that is not given easily and cannot be faked. This is the moment where silence has done its work. Because now, when people ask how you did it, you don't need a long explanation. Your life becomes the answer. At the end of all this, what truly changes is not just what you do, but how you exist in the world. Because once you understand the power of silence, you no longer feel the need to expose every thought, every plan, every movement. You begin to move with a different kind of awareness, one that is calm, precise, and deeply intentional. In Buddhist philosophy, wisdom is often quiet, not because it has nothing to say, but because it understands the weight of words. The wise do not rush to express, to convince, to be seen. They observe more than they speak. They act more than they announce. And they trust that what is real does not need constant validation to exist. And this creates a completely different way of living. You stop leaking energy through unnecessary conversations. You stop seeking approval for decisions that are already clear within you. You stop explaining your path to people who are not walking it. Instead, you conserve your focus. You protect your direction. You allow your life to unfold with intention rather than noise. And over time, this becomes your greatest advantage. Because while most people are distracted by comparison, by opinions, by the pressure to constantly show and prove, you are grounded. You are building without interruption. You are evolving without external interference. And this creates a level of clarity and consistency that naturally leads to results. Not forced results, not rushed outcomes, but stable, undeniable progress. This is what the Buddhist path quietly teaches, that attachment to recognition creates suffering, but detachment creates freedom. And in that freedom, your actions become more aligned, your decisions more accurate, and your life more intentional. You no longer act to be seen. You act because it is the right thing to do. And from that place, prosperity is no longer something you chase. It becomes something that follows you as a reflection of who you have become in silence. Because in the end, the loudest lives are not always the most successful ones, but the quiet ones, the ones built with patience, discipline, and awareness, those are the ones that last.